This audiovisual introduces Jane Hoyake's unpublished Second World War diaries. She tells us that during her 70s, she lived in a hotel in German-occupied Amsterdam. The diaries are a scrappy assembly of reflections, dreams, remembrances, conversations, and scripture. It is these fragments that tell us the precious little we know of Jane. Even the fullest account of a person's life is full of gaps. Life outpaces notation. Still, the least fragment can be rewarding if tantalising. Jane's fragments reward attention as an exemplar of the ambiguities, inadequacies, and opportunities of attempts at, for example, authentic self-examination and expression and agency. Diarists rarely discuss agency or self as a critic might. They have the poet's touch for the profound. Indeed, the form's poetic gives a special kind of expression to the often ambiguous aspects of lived experience. Diaries also tell us that such ambiguities recur in every time and place. The poetics of diary refers to the form's writing modes, including spontaneous, extempore, explorative, and fragmentary. In the audiovisual, you will hear how, as any of us might, Jane sought agency. She seems to make daily calls on her claims to agency as she asserts a desire to overcome all earthly distractions. Jane fears for herself and Amsterdam. She writes often of the grueling effects of occupation, including starvation, bombardments, curfews, and lack of post and fuel. She is simultaneously a little scathing of her country, declaring that the Dutch have formed a certain collective character. Where to find congenial people in Holland, she asks. They are all made from the same pattern. For Jane, as for any urbanite, the city becomes a metaphor for the parade of influences which are alike at work in physical places and our minds. Against this fraught urban backdrop, Jane energetically declares herself determined to fashion her own being, which in particular involves a religious form of self-abnegation. Jane seems prepared up to a point to submit to her religion, but much less so to Amsterdam's norms. Much as she strives to be free, to be spiritual, she is anchored by war, culture, the past, the inevitable frailties of age and starvation, and in her words, a lack of self-control. Jane's claims to agency are ambiguous, not least because her desire for self-abnegation requires that she deploy her will to overcome her will, and all such inner processes are self-verifying. However, Jane liberally uses agentic words and phrases such as the ability to overcome, freedom and choice. She explores the ambiguities and paradoxes of her attempts at agency according to a critical compass that is free of academic rhetoric. Another logic is applied to her problems. The exercise and spontaneity characteristics of diary in particular encourage or complement an almost pre-reflective, intuitive and free-thinking mode. Jane is embedded in her experience and its description. The articulacy of her diary language and of her emotions uncouples her actions from logic and reveals their naked ambition. In extempore mode, diarists can pause to become immersed in and hope to capture something of any given experience or moment. Jane's extemporization in her diary suggests she is not necessarily concerned with shaping the moment or bothered whether to trust its happenstance. The diary form, its dailiness and extemporization cultivates and grounds us in the vividness of immediacy. Just as habits offer the stability of routine, fully inhabiting the everyday lends its own type of certainty to ambiguity, not least by bringing uncertainty into focus. This mode is not attempting to coordinate or understand life intellectually. It allowed Jane and allows us to approach our essential mysteries or the unknowns we deal with on a daily basis, even when we can't quite express them. Some diarists, Susan Sontag included, think there is perhaps a profounder truth, one more authentic if we could only grasp it. The diary is something of a recognition that we have at least attended to, inhabited the task of looking for it. By way of expanding on the role the diary form plays in the world, I have been looking at Jane's diaries, but also Gertrude Stein's prototype autofiction, diaries by prototype diarist Marcus Aurelius, Albert Einstein, Charlotte Forten, Ludwig Wittgenstein and Susan Sontag. Whether focused on the prosaic or the profound, on self or social agency, the writers illustrate that the form is often used to self-narrate with greater freedom than is found elsewhere. Some of the diarist's efforts have been performative, deluded or deceitful, and some have set the highest standards in frank self-examination, often in aid of self-cultivation or seeking agency. All, including Jane, generally concede the great difficulty, perhaps impossibility of achieving their ambitions. Many of their struggles flow well with the perennial philosophical debate about agency and authenticity. In the age of AI, such issues matter in new and powerful ways. Clearly, the ways in which the diary form evokes and approaches elusive material augments the autoethnographic exercise. The discussion of agency matters to autoethnographers in two ways. It pertains to ourself at work on itself and to ourself acting in the world. The personal is political, a 1970s slogan, has been reinvented in the 2020s, where critics like Fournier and Dark link autoethnographic and auto-theoretical perspectives to diary hermeneutics, widening political representation, activism and participation, and to increasingly scrutinising and interactive mass media. Plummer, Eakin, Ballant and Brandt variously reinforce and confront the idea that our personal narratives hold social transformative power. The autoethnographic ambition perhaps has a responsibility, especially when it seeks to affect social change. After all, the limits on the class of truth a diarist and their critic might aspire to are the limits of all aspirations to knowledge. I recently posed the gap hypothesis in 2 articles. It is a simple critical device grounded in the idea that much study in life, personal or social, is a matter of trying to educate one's guesses about the unknown. It is one of several diary-derived approaches that go beyond the diary and amount to a strategy for the discussion of veracity, not least in seeing that the form is often truth-seeking and aesthetically effective. Any single approach to diaries or experience will of course remain one of many discursive possibilities. To paraphrase Wallace Stevens, we are dealing with poetry, not philosophy. Say what you will, it is impossible to formulate a system. Amsterdam, June 13th, 1940. I arrived here on August the 27th, 1939 by plane. I was sobbing and had to master myself and get quiet. September the 2nd, 1939, war began. The Great Tribulation. Percy wrote then that he had made me leave because it was better for me that I was in my own country. I'm still here. Shall I ever go away? 25th of March, 1940. It's good that Percy wrote me that in our love time nor space exist, because now we have German time, and when we have 10 p.m, Percy has only 8 p.m. May, 1940. So many struggles, experiences, tremblings and stumblings and tears, and so often. And on the 10th of May, 1940, the Germans invaded. Will they ever leave? I don't care. I have no country anymore. I'm happy he's taken my country from me. I should not have had the strength to give it up myself. If I did, it would not avail anything, because it would be the self that had done it. 1940. Life goes on as though there were no war, but it's so terrible when everything seems gone from my memory, from my realising of the truth. I can never teach. I'm a woman. I have self-abnegated myself. I have given my will to God. I live it. I am in it. I look down on it, but I myself do not move. I only change in myself, and who knows how long that march will last. My inner single eye on the goal. I'm beginning to understand why, as a child and a young girl, I was as I was then. So, after all, with all my sufferings and through the family, I see the silver thread which led me where I am now, and I'm grateful for every pain and sorrow. Today it happened that I took the lift to go down, and before I made it down, somebody made it go to the 4th floor, and when that person opened the door, it was a German officer, and before he got in, I jumped out. It was an impulsive action. No hatred moved me. September the 2nd, 1940. Right action is the law of self-abnegation, resulting in absolute indifference and unconcern for results of action, the total extinction of personal and individualistic recognition and acceptance of the ego. Now that is very important. There's nothing to add to it, except I'm very, very far from performing right action, and maybe I never shall be able to, being a woman. 28th of November 1940. I know now that keeping a diary is not good, because I write full of my sufferings and longings, and where is the self-abnegation then of the self? November the 14th, 1943. Desires drop away from us automatically if we remain true to the spirit of self-abnegation. The fight never ceases. To have nothing to do makes it more difficult to overcoming obsessing desire, strong desire, tormentedness, longing for Italy in old times. December the 30th, 1943. How good it is just now for me, because it helps me to remember, and I felt so ashamed because I had forgotten all the exactions upon my life in the flesh, a strong mortification and shame, that horrible flesh body, how I do hate it. December the 31st, 1943. I must also give up, I must abnegate my longing for affection. January the 15th, 1944. I have to confess bad thoughts. Also, I wrote to Antoinette how much my mother suffered through Henriette, and I ought not to have done that. Several little things were done to me in the hotel which hurt me and make it very difficult not to resent. I wonder if the need to sleep comes from the state of my mortal body. January the 11th, 1945, 11:55 a.m. It's colder still, but not in my soul. March the 5th, 1945. Today I'm up again with much pain. It's colder. Butter is paid now 125 for half a kilo. People fall dead in the street for want of food. April 29th, 1945. In bed again since yesterday. It's cold, but this is the news. Hitler is dead. It's to be hoped to be true. May the 3rd, 1945. Cold and hungry, but the Allies are throwing very much food from the air. May the 5th, 1945. They call it peace. It's only a cessation of gunfire and murdering. I remember thousands and thousands and perhaps millions killed or mutilated, and a very great intense longing came upon me.